Hey, we are here at HQ Greensboro. I'm here with my good friend Jasmine. We are going to talk about healthcare analytics. So my name is John David. And so let's just start with the first question. How did you get into healthcare analytics?
So I've worked in healthcare for about 2 decades now, and I have mostly worked in hospitals. I've done a lot of different things in the hospital space. I was a patient relations manager for a while, did staff development for a while, and what got me into analytics was a desire to be involved in the frontier of healthcare.
Cool.
So when I think about the frontier of healthcare, one of the areas that's on the frontier is what we call value-based care. So this is helping doctors learn how to keep people healthy instead of just seeing them when they're sick. Mm-hmm. It keeps people healthier, obviously, it saves money, and it's really the way forward for our healthcare system, which I think all of us realize has a lot of challenges. And so when I was looking for a job in that space right after I finished my master's degree, the opportunity that came up was an analytics opportunity. And I thought, okay, I'm kind of good at math. Maybe this is a good thing for me. And it's just really been a wonderful experience from the start with analytics. I was able to take some of the things I'd done in my past and really use them in some new ways.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've heard the old adage, it's called healthcare, not sick care. Right?
Yeah. Hopefully, we want it to be healthcare, not sick care.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that approach is just costing a huge amount of money, just in a general. So what kind of projects are you currently managing right now?
So I'll tell you a little bit about where I work, what I do. So I work for a company called Chess. We are a organization that helps physician groups and hospital systems transition from that churn and burn, see as many sick patients as you can model to a model where you keep a population of people healthy and get rewarded for that financially.
Oh, cool.
So we don't actually do any care provision ourselves. We teach them how to do that. We also help them negotiate contracts that reward that kind of patient care. And so my role is Director of Clinical Data Solutions. I lead a team of 10 to 11 analysts, developers, and people like that. And so our job is really to provide the data that supports this population health focused work. So some of the things that we've been working on lately, we developed what we call a provider scorecard, and this is a Tableau tool that takes an individual doctor's cost of care, how many times their patients are going to the emergency room, how many inpatient visits they're having, a bunch of metrics like that, and wraps it up across all these various contracts and presents it in an easily digestible format. So you can sit down with the physician and say, okay, here's how the health of your panel is as expressed by things like how often are they seeing a physician, how often do they have inpatient visits, that sort of thing. And then compare them against their peers. So if they have similar patient groups that they're caring for, but Dr. A's patients are going into the hospital 50% more, then there's an opportunity to do some intervention there. Maybe we need to do something different with how those patients are being cared for.
So you're kind of in like the innovation space.
Absolutely. Yeah, the core of the work that our company does is really focused on innovation in the space. How do we care for patients in a different way so that it's cheaper, it's better for the people who provide the care, it's better for the people who get the care. Another thing that we've done recently is created what we're calling a gap list. So many of our contracts require providers to achieve certain quality measures. And these quality measures are things like if you have diabetic patients, they have to have lab values in a certain range to show that their diabetes is controlled. So this gets measured on an annual basis. And one thing that we want to do is empower the people we work with to find the patients who aren't meeting those quality measures and intervene before the end of the year. So if you have someone, for example, who has an out-of-control lab value, maybe you need to bring them into the physician's office and see about a different medication regimen or something else for them. We also have quality measures around things like colorectal cancer screenings, breast cancer screenings, and those are pretty easy gaps to close if you just know who needs to go in and get a mammogram, right? Or who needs that kind of thing. So we built out a tool that shows all of the gaps that we could find in their electronic medical record for these measures, plus all of the information that we see and the information we get from other places.
Is that an automated process? So
So we're in an interesting development phase with that. We've got it built out where it comes out monthly, and it's a snapshot. So at this point in the month, it pops out.
So is that in Tableau?
It's in SSRS right now, which is SQL Server Reporting Services, and we're looking at how we can translate that information into Tableau.
Because so with some of my consulting clients, they're in the manufacturing space, and anytime that one of their products hits below 80% in stock percentages, we have an automated email. So I know that Tableau has the capability of sending automatic email once, and I think what you could do is potentially take those metrics, and within a certain range it's fine, but once they go beyond that threshold, automatically send an email, and that'd be able to expand your team a whole lot.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I think part of the challenge is how do you when we're talking about 25,000 patients, how do you efficiently transmit the information? So there's a lot of ways to approach that.
Cool. Well, so talking to you earlier, I know that you guys are growing like crazy.
We are.
And you are currently looking to fill 2 positions. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can do that. So we have an open position right now that is a combination of database administrator and SQL developer. We are looking for a really experienced person in that role. It's not an entry-level role by any means. Someone with solid database administration experience, really strong SQL development skills, and that's been a little bit of a challenging role to fill. In the data world, you've got DBAs and you've got SQL developers, and they're not usually the same person. So trying to find someone with both of those skill sets has been a little challenging. The other position that we're filling is a much more junior position. It's titled data analyst, and it's sort of an entry-level person to do work in Excel with the willingness to learn things like Tableau and SSRS. A little bit of SQL coding skills are great if they have them, but a willingness to learn is more important than the skills for that role.
Interesting. Yeah, so you're kind of bumping up into my world, the Tableau world. So what traits do you look for specifically for a Tableau developer, or how would you want someone that you're managing to approach Tableau?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's sort of interesting. In chess, we were a very Tableau-heavy shop maybe 4 years ago, and then there were a lot of staff and leadership changes, and it wasn't as in heavy use. So now we're in a place where we're really bringing it back. I think curiosity is an important trait for people working in Tableau. One of the great things about Tableau is it lets you so easily move things around and try different things. And so when you have people who have worked in SQL for a long time and they transition to Tableau, SQL doesn't let you do that. You can't just move things to a different shelf and then get a different output. You have to recode everything you've developed. So getting them to a point where they're comfortable with being much more flexible in the way they're looking at the data is an important stepping stone. And then I also think, learning how to design things for visual appeal is important. One of the things that I really like about Tableau is the ability to provide a really rich set of data in a small graph. So you can do a scatter plot and you've got your X and Y axis, and then the size of the mark can indicate something and the color of the mark can indicate something else.
Shape.
Yeah, so you have a lot of richness visually, and getting people to learn to take advantage of that is an important transition point.
Yeah, well, it seems like that is becoming more and more the differentiating factor. Like we have these huge swaths of data, and it used to be that just having the data was a competitive advantage. But now it's what data can you cut out to then make the image so much clearer.
Right.
Yeah. So let's see. What horror stories do you have?
I have a few. I would bundle them up into a couple of categories.
Okay.
So one area of horror story that I see is a belief that people, and I would say this is both analytics people and people just in operational management, a belief that there's a tool that's going to fix your problem. That if we just get some tool, all of our challenges will go away. In my space, the data is often very challenging to work with. We don't have a lot of control over what the data looks like when we get it. The data comes to us in a lot of different formats from different places, and we just have to figure out how to clean it up. So every once in a while, someone will decide, oh, if we just had this tool, or if we buy a product from this vendor, all of our data problems are going to go away. And the important thing to realize about tools is that there is no perfect tool, and that any tool that you buy takes work. So it takes work to learn how to use it. It takes work to put your data into it. And you kind of have to evaluate, is the juice worth the squeeze for that particular tool? So I've seen a few rounds where someone will decide, oh, we're going to buy this thing, and then it's going to fix all our problems. And I've never seen it fix all the problems. It's often just a lot of new problems to figure out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've heard that about automation, automation is going to completely wipe out all the jobs. But then once you automate the solution, it creates new problems. Like the problems. Yeah, I think that's kind of a mindset, kind of static versus growth. Like if we can just change the state of being, then all the problems are going to go away. Problems are, in a weird way, I think that if you didn't have a problem, you wouldn't have a job.
That's so true.
You need to be thankful for these problems.
Right.
And it's an opportunity for you to show up and actually kind of expand your skill set, your mentality, kind of like your understanding of the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
The other area where I see some horror stories and things, lost my train of thought there. I had another one.
Did you write it down?
Yes, I did. Okay, so the other area where I see some horror stories is when people don't really know the data they're working with. So I think it is so important to truly understand what the data is saying. I have seen countless times where people haven't read the data dictionary, or they're not familiar enough with the business processes to know what the data is saying, and they make assumptions from that data that are not based in fact. So it's just really important, the technical skill of SQL or the technical skill of using Tableau is absolutely critical for an analyst, but you also really have to understand what your data mean and how to present them in a way that is valid and defensible. So really, data dictionaries are boring, but they're also really important to read and understand. And then I think the flip side of that is if you are in a position where you're creating a data warehouse or developing some sort of data product like that, the documentation of what you've done and how you've done it in a human readable format is really important.
Wow. So yeah, that's kind of outside of my lane. I'm working with nonprofits and manufacturers in my consulting base right now, and what I'm approaching in Tableau isn't a huge amount of data. I mean, there are multiple data sources, but it sounds like you guys are pulling in essentially big data, right?
It's interesting because I don't think we qualify as big data.
Really?
It's such a question of what is big, how big is big data. I think we have, in many ways, really dirty data, but I don't, in terms of numbers of rows in the database, it's not that big. We're, not doing Hadoop or any of those NoSQL solutions. We are a shop with a SQL Server backend and then a variety of analytic tools on the front end. Tableau, SSRS, a little bit of R. So those ones.
Are you guys doing any type of predictive modeling?
That is the hot next topic for us. Yeah. In our space, there is some products you can buy, predictive models that are already developed. And those are predictive models that really look at predicting whether someone's going to have a hospitalization or how much money they're going to spend in healthcare costs in the next year.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of buy that already baked and just bolt it on to whatever you're currently doing. And then there are some people in our space that are building their own. They're sort of looking at the data they have and trying to figure out how to do their own predictions that might be more meaningful to their specific work. We're right on the cusp of that. I think we're definitely going to look at a prepackaged solution because there's a lot of value in using something that's industry standard and well understood and validated. But we're also looking at ways that we can do more targeted predicted modeling for maybe a specific disease population or a group of people that receive a certain kind of care. So that's probably maybe a year out for us, but it's on our radar just like it's on everyone else's radar.
Because we're talking about doing that with predictive sales analytics, which, I mean, you can go so complex with that.
Yeah.
I was talking with a mentor of mine a few days ago, and he was talking about he worked in the big box retail space, and if you're selling, I'm trying to think of what, it was a specific type of product that was affected by the flu. You can't really you can't effectively predict when the flu is going to happen. So each time sales were down, then the sales guy would just cop out and say, well, the flu hit us this year. But I think we're getting to a point where we can start to layer in multiple data sources. Do you guys use any CDC data or census data to like?
Yeah, we have in the past used some census data. CDC is often not as helpful for us because even though we think of ourselves as doing population health, it really happens patient by patient by patient. So adding in that census data can be helpful. What
about, because I did interview with a company a while back that they kind of wanted to benchmark. Yeah, I almost went kind of into the healthcare space. I decided I didn't want that opportunity. But you could study census data and then start to kind of a typical male who's between 35 and 45 or something like that, and then you get kind of you get benchmarks. And are you guys using benchmarks to, or I guess you guys are internally creating those benchmarks, aren't you?
It's a mix. So we have a fancy term for what you're describing in our industry. It's called social determinants of health, which is
so we don't have the same jargon, lingo, vernacular.
But it's exactly that. It's looking at income, availability of healthy food, walkability of the neighborhood. Those kinds of factors can contribute to someone's healthfulness.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I can't believe you made it all the way through a 20-minute video. Jasmine must be super interesting. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the other projects that I'm working on. Specifically, my other channel, Silvertone Analytics. In that video, I go through how I use Tableau in my consulting base and how I approach problem solving there. Also, I am going to continue to push forward with putting these interviews together. I've known Jasmine for a few years now, and it's really interesting digging in really deep into what she does on a daily basis. I mean, we've talked quite a bit about what she does for work, but not nearly on this level. And this also seems like an awesome opportunity for me to reach out with sort of a legit reason to those outside of my network to get them to sit down with me and talk about what they're doing. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.